He did not plan to come home that day. The trip was supposed to last 3 more days. Meetings were lined up, calls scheduled, hotel already paid for. But something inside him felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. The kind of tired that came from carrying too much for too long. He was a single father, and his life had been that way for years. Since his wife passed away, every decision, every worry, every quiet fear rested on his shoulders alone. He worked hard, not because he loved work, but because work was how he protected his child. Bills did not wait. Food did not appear by hope. And children needed stability, even when their parents felt anything but stable inside. That morning, one meeting got canceled. Then another. By noon, he found himself staring out a tall glass window, watching cars move far below, and suddenly realized he wanted to be home. Not later, not after the trip. Now, he booked the earliest flight back without telling anyone. Not his sister, who was watching his child for the weekend. Not the maid, who usually left before evening. No one. He liked the idea of returning quietly. No questions, no expectations. Just his house, his bed, and one full night of rest. The flight landed late in the evening. By the time he reached his neighborhood, the streets were calm and almost empty. The lights in his house were off, just as he expected. He unlocked the front door slowly, careful not to make noise out of habit. Even though he believed the house would be empty, the familiar smell of cleaning soap and cooked food still lingered in the air. Everything looked neat. Shoes aligned near the door. Couch pillows in place. She had done her job well, as always. The maid had been working for him for nearly a year. Quiet, polite, reliable. She spoke only when needed, never complained, never asked for favors. She came early, left before dark, and never crossed boundaries. That was why he trusted her. That night, he did not turn on the lights. He dropped his bag near the entrance and walked straight toward his bedroom, already thinking about sleep. When he pushed the door open, he stopped. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp near the window. At first, his tired mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. His bed covers were pulled back. Someone was lying there. For a split second, fear ran through him. Then confusion. Then shock. The maid was asleep in his bed. She was lying on the far edge, curled slightly, still wearing the simple clothes she worked in. Her shoes were neatly placed near the door. Her hands were folded close to her chest, like someone afraid to take up too much space even while sleeping. He stood frozen. His heart started beating fast, not from anger yet, but from disbelief. Why was she there? His thoughts raced. Had she misunderstood something? Had something inappropriate happened? Had someone else been here earlier? 100 questions filled his head in seconds. This was his personal space. The one place he kept closed to the world. The only place that still felt like it belonged just to him. And she was there. He felt his jaw tighten. A sense of boundary crossed. A sense of control slipping. But then, he noticed something that made him pause. She looked exhausted. Not peacefully asleep. Not comfortably resting. Her face was tense even in sleep. Dark circles under her eyes. Her breathing uneven, like someone who had cried earlier or hadn't slept properly in days. Still, none of that explained why she was in his bed. He took one step back, then another, as if trying to decide whether to leave the room or wake her up. Part of him wanted to shout. Another part wanted to walk away and pretend he never saw this. Before he decided, she stirred. Her eyes opened suddenly, wide and confused. It took her a second to realize where she was. Then her eyes met his. Her face drained of color. She sat up so fast the blanket slipped off her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were coming back." She stood up quickly, almost tripping, pulling the blanket back into place, as if trying to erase herself from the scene. "I didn't mean to." She stopped, swallowing hard. Her hands were trembling. He noticed that too. "Why are you here?" he asked. His voice was calm, but firm. He was careful not to raise it. His child slept lightly at home. He had learned long ago that loud voices fixed nothing. She could barely look at him. "Please don't fire me," she said softly. "I'll leave right now." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. Not an explanation. Not an excuse. Just fear. "Sit down," he said after a moment. Not harshly. Just steady. She hesitated, then slowly sat on the edge of the bed, keeping as much distance as possible. Her posture was stiff, like someone waiting for a verdict. He took a deep breath. "I'm listening," he said. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Her fingers twisted together. Then words started falling out, fast and broken. She told him she had planned to leave early that evening. Everything had been normal until that afternoon. A pipe burst in the building where she rented a small room. Water flooded the floor. The landlord told everyone to leave until repairs were done. She had no family nearby, no close friends in the city. Her phone battery was nearly dead. She went to 2 cheap places to stay, but both asked for full payment up front. She did not have it. She came back to his house after work hours, planning only to rest for a moment. She intended to sleep on the couch and leave before sunrise. She was too ashamed to ask for help, too afraid of crossing a line. She said she sat on the bed just to catch her breath. "That's all," she whispered. "I didn't plan to sleep. I swear." He watched her closely as she spoke. Her eyes were red, not from pretending, from real crying. He believed her. Still, his mind struggled to process everything. He had hired her to clean, not to live in his house. He had rules, boundaries, structure. That structure was how he kept his life from falling apart. Yet standing there, looking at her, he did not see someone taking advantage. He saw someone broken by circumstances. "You should have told me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I didn't want to cause trouble." That sentence stayed with him. He remembered how often he himself said the same thing to others. How often he carried things alone to avoid burdening anyone. Silence filled the room. Outside, a car passed slowly. Somewhere, a dog barked. The world continued as if nothing strange had happened. He realized something then. He had been so focused on surviving his own life that he never really saw the lives around him. She came every day, cleaned his home, cooked food his child loved, folded laundry with care. Yet he knew almost nothing about her. "Are you safe right now?" he asked. She hesitated. "For tonight? I don't know." That was when he understood this was not just an awkward moment. It was something bigger, something human. He looked around the room, his room, the place he thought was only about his comfort, his privacy, his rest, and suddenly, it felt small to focus only on that. "Get some water," he said gently. "You look exhausted." She nodded, still unsure, still afraid this kindness might disappear at any moment. As she walked toward the kitchen, he sat down on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. That night did not go the way he planned. But as he sat there, listening to the quiet sound of the house, he felt something shift inside him. This was only the beginning. And neither of them knew yet that this unexpected return home would change far more than just one night. He did not sleep much that night. After she went to the kitchen, he stepped out of the bedroom and gave her space. He sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, listening to the soft sounds of the house. A cupboard opening, a glass being filled with water, slow footsteps, careful, like she was afraid the floor itself might complain. She returned after a few minutes and stood near the doorway, holding the glass with both hands. She did not sit until he nodded. The silence between them felt heavy, but not hostile. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people are unsure how to move forward without making things worse. "You don't have to rush out tonight," he said finally. "It's late." Her eyes widened slightly. "I can sleep on the couch," she said quickly. "I won't disturb anything. I'll leave before morning." He studied her face again. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something else. Deep tiredness. The kind that does not come from one bad day, but from many. "You said the flooding happened today," he said. She nodded. "Yes, but you look like you haven't slept properly in days." She lowered her eyes. "I haven't." That was when the truth began to unfold, slowly and carefully, like something fragile. She admitted that the flooding had happened earlier in the week, not just that day. She had not wanted to explain more at first, but once the words started, they kept coming. After losing her room, she stayed with a distant acquaintance for one night. The place was crowded. Loud. She barely slept. The next night, she stayed at a bus station until morning, sitting upright, afraid to close her eyes. By the third day, her body simply gave up. She came to work every morning as usual, cleaned, cooked, smiled politely, then left to wander until she found somewhere she could sit without being noticed. She never told him because she believed she was not important enough to bring her problems into someone else's life. As she spoke, he felt a tightness in his chest he could not explain. He thought about how many times he himself walked through his days on empty, smiling for his child, holding everything together until he could finally be alone. He had always believed suffering quietly was a strength. Now he wasn't so sure. "You could have told me," he said again, but softer this time. She shook her head. "People don't like complications," she said. "I didn't want to be one." That sentence stayed in the air between them. He realized then how easy it was for someone like him to forget the power imbalance. To forget that for her, one mistake could mean losing everything. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said after a moment. "But sleeping in my bed crossed a line. You understand that, right?" She nodded immediately. "I do. It won't happen again." He believed her. What bothered him was not the mistake itself, but what led to it. He stood up and walked toward the hallway. "There's a small storage room near the laundry area," he said. "Did you use that?" She hesitated. "Yes," she whispered. "For how long?" "A few nights." He closed his eyes briefly. That room was narrow, cold, and barely used. He had walked past it every day without thinking. Meanwhile, someone was sleeping there quietly under his roof, trying not to exist. He felt ashamed. "You should rest properly tonight," he said. "Not on the couch. You need real sleep." She looked at him, confused and frightened at the same time. "I don't understand." "The guest room," he explained. "It's clean. You can use it." She stood up abruptly. "No, I can't. People will talk." "Who?" he asked. She didn't answer. He understood what she meant. Judgment, assumptions, the kind that ruin reputations without asking questions. "This is my house," he said calmly, "and my responsibility. You're here because you had nowhere else to go. That's all." She looked like she wanted to argue, but her body was clearly too tired. He walked her to the guest room, showed her where the towels were, and left the door open slightly so she wouldn't feel trapped. "Sleep," he said. "We'll talk in the morning." When he finally lay down on the couch himself, he stared at the ceiling for a long time. He thought about his child. He thought about the kind of example he was setting, not through words, but through actions. One day, his child would grow up and ask questions about kindness, about fairness, about how to treat people who had less. He wondered what answer he would want to give. Morning came quietly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. The house smelled like fresh tea. She was already awake, standing in the kitchen, preparing breakfast out of habit. When she saw him, she froze like she had been caught doing something wrong. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. They ate in silence, but it was different now. Less tense, more thoughtful. After breakfast, he told her to sit down. This time, she did without hesitation. "I need to understand your situation properly," he said. "Not to judge you, to help." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. She told him about her younger siblings living far away, about how she sent most of her money home every month, about how she avoided spending on herself because there was always someone else who needed it more. She spoke without drama, just facts, as if this was normal life. He realized how sheltered his own problems suddenly felt. He had money, a house, family support. Even grief, though heavy, was something he did not carry alone anymore. "You're strong," he said without thinking. She shook her head. "I'm just surviving." That answer hit him harder. He asked about her plans. She had none. She hoped the building would be fixed soon. If not, she would find another room, maybe farther away, maybe more expensive. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he leaned back and made a decision that felt risky, but right. "You can stay here for a short time," he said, "in the guest room, until you find something stable." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "I can't accept charity." "This isn't charity," he replied. You work here. You've helped keep this house running when I was barely holding myself together. Consider this balance." She tried to protest, but her voice broke. He handed her a tissue and looked away, giving her dignity. Later that day, his child returned home. He explained the situation in simple terms, without details, just that someone needed help. The child listened quietly, then nodded. "She always takes care of me," the child said. "It's okay." That simple approval made everything feel lighter. Over the next few days, the house changed in small ways. Laughter returned to the kitchen. Conversations happened without fear. Meals were shared, not rushed. But beneath the calm, both of them knew this was temporary. A pause, not a solution. Still, something important had already shifted. He no longer saw her as just a maid, and she no longer saw the house as a place where she had to disappear. Neither of them knew yet how deeply this moment would affect their futures. But one thing was clear. What began as shock was slowly turning into understanding. And understanding, once it takes root, has a way of changing everything. The house felt different after she moved into the guest room. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, just different. At first, both of them tried too hard to act normal. She woke up earlier than usual, cleaned more than necessary, and avoided sitting down for long. He pretended not to notice. He continued his routine, going to work, making calls, checking on his child's homework, and handling life the way he always had. But small things began to stand out. One evening, he came home earlier than expected. The living room light was on. His child was at the table doing homework, and she was sitting nearby, helping with a school project. They were both laughing over something small, maybe a spelling mistake or a drawing that didn't look right. He stood quietly by the door for a moment, watching. It had been a long time since he heard that kind of relaxed laughter in his house. After his wife passed away, Joy had become careful, controlled. Even when they smiled, there was always something missing. He had tried his best, but he knew he could not fill every space. When they noticed him, they both stopped laughing at once, like children caught doing something wrong. "You're home early," she said, standing up quickly. "Yes," he replied. Meeting ended sooner. His child ran to him and hugged him tightly. "We're making a model for school," the child said proudly. He nodded and walked closer to the table. The project was simple but creative. Cardboard, colored paper, glue spread unevenly in places. "You're good at this," he said to her. She shrugged lightly. "I used to help my siblings with schoolwork." That was the first time she mentioned them in front of his child. "How many do you have?" he asked. "Two younger ones," she replied. "A brother and a sister." His child's eyes widened. "Do you miss them?" She paused before answering. "Every day." The room grew quiet for a second, but not in a heavy way. Just honest. That night, after dinner, he found himself thinking more about her life outside his house. He had learned pieces of her story, but not the full picture. A few days later, he came home and heard a soft sound from the laundry area. Not the machine running. A different sound. Crying. He walked slowly toward it and saw her sitting on a small stool, holding her phone in her hand. She quickly wiped her face when she noticed him. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "For what?" he asked gently. "For being emotional." He leaned against the doorframe. "Did something happen?" She hesitated, then handed him the phone. On the screen was a photo. Two young children standing in front of a small house, smiling, but their clothes looked worn. "They need school fees," she said quietly. "The deadline is tomorrow." He frowned. "But you just sent money last week." "Yes," she replied. "But there were extra charges. Books, uniform repairs." He could hear the stress in her voice. Not dramatic, just tired. "How much?" he asked. She told him the amount. It wasn't huge for him, but for her, it clearly was. "I'll manage," she added quickly. "I can borrow from someone." "Who?" he asked. She didn't answer. He knew what that meant. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He remembered the nights he stayed awake, worrying about medical bills years ago. The helpless feeling of numbers not adding up. The next morning, he transferred the amount to her and told her it was an advance on her salary. She stared at the message on her phone for a long time. "I'll repay you," she said firmly. "I know," he replied. Something changed after that. She began to open up more. Not all at once, but in pieces. He learned that after their parents passed away, she left school to work. She was barely older than a child herself. She moved to the city because someone told her there were jobs here. She worked in restaurants first, then cleaning houses. Some employers were kind, some were not. She told him once about a family who accused her of stealing money that was later found inside their own drawer. They never apologized. They simply told her not to return. "That's when I stopped explaining myself," she said. "People believe what they want." He felt anger rise inside him when he heard that. Not loud anger, the quiet kind that sits deep. "You're not invisible here," he said. She gave him a small smile. "I know." Weeks passed. One afternoon, he received a call from a neighbor. The neighbor sounded hesitant. "I don't want to interfere," the neighbor said, "but I've seen your maid going in and out late at night. People might misunderstand." He knew exactly what that meant. Rumors. He thanked the neighbor calmly and hung up. That evening, he told her about the call. She immediately looked ashamed. "I'll leave," she said. "No," he replied. "You've done nothing wrong." "But people—" "Let them think," he interrupted gently. "I know the truth. That's enough." She looked at him in a way she never had before. Not like an employer. Not like someone to fear. Like someone she trusted. Still, the situation made him reflect. He had always cared about reputation, about what others thought. Being a single father already came with enough judgment. He did not need more. But when he imagined asking her to leave because of gossip, something inside him resisted. One night, while cleaning the hallway closet, he found something unexpected. A thin folder tucked carefully behind folded blankets. He opened it. Inside were certificates, old school awards, a recommendation letter from a teacher years ago praising her dedication and intelligence. At the bottom was a form, an application for a caregiving course, unsubmitted. He held it in his hands for a long time. That evening, he placed the folder on the kitchen table. "You never told me you wanted to study again," he said. She froze when she saw the papers. "I didn't think it mattered," she replied softly. "Why didn't you apply?" She gave a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "The fee is 3 months of my salary." He sat down across from her. "You're good with people," he said. "You're patient, responsible. Why give up on that?" "Dreams are expensive," she answered. He looked at her seriously. So is regret. The word surprised even him. He had spent years telling himself he could not slow down, could not think about his own unfinished dreams because responsibility came first. Maybe that was why this conversation felt personal. "What if," he began carefully, "we find a way?" She looked confused. "What way?" "You apply. I help with the fee as a loan. You study in the evenings. We adjust your schedule here." She shook her head quickly. "That's too much." "It's an investment," he corrected, "in someone who deserves a chance." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different. Not from fear, from hope. For the first time since he had known her, he saw her not just as someone surviving, but as someone with potential waiting to breathe. That night, after everyone went to sleep, he sat alone in the living room. He thought about the moment he found her in his bed. How easy it would have been to react with anger. How simple it would have been to end her job and move on. No one would have questioned him. Instead, he chose to listen. And now, weeks later, he realized something unexpected. Helping her was not a burden. It was healing something in him too. Because in supporting her, he was also proving to himself that kindness was not weakness. It was strength. And he had a feeling this story was far from over. Life did not suddenly become easy after that conversation. If anything, it became more complicated. The application was submitted a week later. She double-checked every detail, afraid of making a mistake. When she finally pressed the submit button, her hands were shaking. She sat quietly afterward, staring at the screen like it might disappear as she looked away. "I don't know if they'll accept me," she said. "They will," he replied. "And if they don't, you try again." No one had ever spoken to her that way before. with certainty, with patience. The waiting period felt long. Days passed, then weeks. During that time, the house continued its new rhythm. She started attending free online lessons in the evenings, just to prepare herself. Sometimes he would pass by the living room and see her sitting on the floor with books spread out, listening carefully through old earphones. She would pause the video when she noticed him, embarrassed to be seen trying. "You don't have to stop," he told her once. "I'm not interrupting." Slowly, she became more confident. His child began asking her questions too, about hospitals, about helping people, about how bodies heal. She wants to help people feel less scared. The child told him one night, like it was the most important thing in the world. That sentence stayed with him. Then one afternoon, the message arrived. She read it 3 times before believing it. She was accepted. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping down her cheeks without sound. He stood across the room, watching her reaction, feeling an unexpected tightness in his own throat. "I got in," she whispered. He smiled. "I told you." They celebrated quietly that night. No big gestures, just homemade food and a rare sense of calm. But not everyone was happy. A few days later, another neighbor stopped him outside the house. This time, the tone was sharper. "People are talking," the neighbor said. "It doesn't look good." He listened without interrupting. "They say she's more than just your maid," the neighbor continued. "You should be careful, for your child's sake." That was the moment he realized kindness often comes with consequences. He did not argue. He did not explain. He simply nodded and walked away. That evening, he told her about it. She did not cry this time. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll start looking for another place." "No," he said again, "but I don't want to cause problems." "You're not the problem," he replied. "People's assumptions are—" She looked down at her hands. Assumptions can still hurt. He knew she was right. That night, he sat alone after everyone went to sleep. He thought about the years after his wife's passing, how people watched him closely, how any small mistake became a story, how loneliness became easier than explanation. He understood what she was feeling better than he expected. The next morning, he made a decision. He called a local housing support office and gathered information, not for her to leave immediately, but so she would have options, stability, control over her future. He printed the details and handed them to her. "This is not me pushing you out," he said. "This is me making sure you're never trapped again." She looked at the papers, then at him. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. Classes started soon after. Her days became fuller. Work in the mornings, study in the evenings. Some nights, she returned late, exhausted but smiling. He adjusted her schedule so she could attend classes without stress. He cooked more often, learned to pack lunches. Small changes that made a big difference. One evening, she came home unusually quiet. He noticed immediately. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke. "Someone in class said I don't belong there. That people like me don't last." Anger flashed through him. "What did you say?" he asked. "I didn't say anything," she replied. "I just listened." "That doesn't make it true," he said firmly. She looked at him. "I know, but it still hurts." He nodded. "Pain doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care." She smiled slightly at that. As months passed, she grew more confident. Her posture changed. Her voice grew steadier. She asked questions without fear of sounding foolish. Even his child noticed. "She walks differently now," the child said one day. "Like she's taller." He laughed softly, but he understood exactly what was meant. Then came the exam period. Stress filled the house again, but it was a different kind of stress. Purposeful, hopeful. She barely slept for days. He reminded her to rest, made tea, left encouraging notes where she would find them without embarrassment. On the morning of her final exam, she stood by the door, frozen. "What if I fail?" she asked. "Then you learn," he replied, "and you try again." She took a deep breath and left. Hours later, she returned, her face unreadable. "I think I did okay," she said carefully. Weeks later, the results arrived. She passed. Not just passed. She did well. She cried openly this time. He didn't stop her. That night, something else happened. She told him she wanted to move out, not because she was pushed, not because of rumors, because she was ready. I need to stand on my own, she said. You helped me learn how. He felt proud and a little sad. They found her a small apartment not too far away. Simple, clean, affordable. On moving day, his child hugged her tightly. You'll still come visit, right? The child asked. Of course, she said. This house is part of my story. After she left, the house felt quieter again, but not empty. He sat alone that night, reflecting on everything that had changed. The shock, the misunderstanding, the choice to listen instead of react. He realized that sometimes the most important moments in life do not announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, unplanned, and they test not your rules, but your heart. Part 4 ended not with an ending, but with growth, because both of them had crossed something important, not a boundary, but a fear. And what came next would surprise everyone even more. After she moved out, the house felt strangely quiet again, not the heavy silence that followed loss, not the lonely silence he had known years ago. This was different. It was a silence that comes after a season ends, when something important has passed, but its warmth still lingers in the walls. Her room, the small guest room at the end of the hallway, was clean and empty, the bed neatly made, the curtains slightly open. He stood there one evening longer than he expected, just looking around. It was hard to believe that a few months ago, everything began with shock, with confusion, with a moment that could have ended very differently. Now she had her own place, a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building, but it was hers. She had a key, a contract in her own name, stability. She didn't work full-time at the house anymore, only part-time, mostly helping when the schedule became overwhelming. The rest of her time was spent training at a local care center. The first day she wore her new uniform. She stopped by the house before heading to work. He opened the door and almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different on the outside, but because she carried herself differently. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes steady. There was a quiet confidence in her expression that had not been there before. I didn't want to be late, she said, smiling nervously, but I wanted you both to see. His child ran to her immediately. You look official, the child said proudly. He simply nodded, unable to hide his smile. You earned it, he said. She shook her head lightly. I didn't earn it alone. They both knew what she meant. Life moved forward. She worked long shifts. Some days were exhausting. Caring for elderly patients was not easy. There were days filled with gratitude and days filled with sadness. She saw loneliness up close, saw how fragile life could be. One evening, she came by after work, looking drained. He noticed it instantly. Hard day, he asked. She sat at the kitchen table and let out a slow breath. I lost someone today, she said softly. An old woman I was caring for. He sat across from her quietly. She used to hold my hand, she continued. She told me I reminded her of her granddaughter. Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't know it would hurt this much. He understood that feeling too well. Caring means allow yourself to feel, he said gently. It's not weakness. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I just didn't expect to carry their stories home with me. That's the cost of having a good heart, he replied. She gave a small smile. Months passed, and something unexpected began to happen. Word spread, not about rumors, not about assumptions, but about her success. Other workers at the care center noticed her dedication. Supervisors praised her patience. Families of patients requested her by name. One afternoon, he received a call from someone he didn't know. The caller introduced himself as a manager from the care center. I just want to say, the manager said, you must be proud. He was confused at first. Proud of what? She told us about how you supported her when she needed help. The manager explained. We see the results of that support every day. He didn't know what to say. After hanging up, he sat still for a long time. He never helped her for recognition. He never expected thanks from strangers. But hearing that the kindness had multiplied beyond his house, that surprised him. That evening, she came over for dinner. He told her about the call. Her eyes widened. They called you? Yes. She looked embarrassed. I only told them because they asked how I managed to finish training while working. And what did you say? I said someone chose to see me as a person, not just a worker. The room went quiet. His child looked between them and smiled without fully understanding the weight of the words. As the year came to an end, something else happened that no one expected. She was offered a permanent position at the center, a stable salary, benefits, growth opportunities. When she told him, her hands were shaking again, just like the day she received her acceptance letter. I never thought this would be my life, she said. You built it, he replied. No, she said firmly. You helped me believe I could. He shook his head. You did the work. She paused, then said something that stayed with him long after. That night, she said quietly, when you found me in your bed, I thought my life was over. I thought I had ruined everything. He remembered the moment clearly. I was scared too, he admitted. She looked surprised. You were? Yes, he said honestly, scared that I might make the wrong choice. She nodded slowly. You didn't, she said. As time went on, their relationship settled into something simple and strong, not defined by titles, not limited by roles. He was no longer just the maid. He was no longer just the employer. They were two people whose lives crossed at the exact moment they both needed change. His child continued to visit her apartment sometimes, helping water plants, listening to stories about the care center, learning lessons about kindness without realizing it. One afternoon, while walking home from school, his child asked him something unexpected. Why didn't you get angry that day? He looked down. Which day? When you found her in your room. He thought carefully before answering. I almost did, he admitted. But sometimes anger is just fear in disguise. Fear of what? The child asked. Fear of losing control, he said. Fear of being taken advantage of. Fear of being hurt again. And what made you stop? The child asked. He smiled softly. I saw someone more afraid than me. That answer seemed to satisfy the question. Years later, when people talk about that story, they focus on the shock, the surprise, the image of a maid asleep in her employer's bed. But those who truly knew the story understood something deeper. The shocking part was not what he found. It was what he chose. He chose to ask instead of accuse. He chose to listen instead of judge. He chose to help instead of protect his pride. And in doing so, he changed not only her life, but his own. Because sometimes a real turning point in life is not a grand event. It is a quiet decision. A decision made in a dimly lit room, in a moment filled with confusion, where you choose compassion over reaction. He still worked hard, still carried responsibilities, still faced struggles like everyone else. But he carried them differently now, with more patience, with more awareness, with the understanding that everyone walking through your door carries a story you may not see. And every once in a while, when he passed by the guest room, he would remember that night, not with shock, but with gratitude, because that unexpected return home did not ruin anything. It revealed something, the kind of person he wanted to be, and the kind of world he wanted his child to grow up in. And that, more than anything, was what truly shocked everyone.